I don't know, what other things might you want to talk about?
Well, the mapping, I think Sarah's probably more versed in that. I know in the very beginning, they only had a compass and an inclinometer and just a tape measure that you stretched out. So today I know they use lasers, but I'm not really into surveying. Just so much time, and I kind of specialize in what I'm interested in is and what I got started was, I guess my first trip here was 94, 93. I'm going to say my first trip was 1988.
Do you want to start now? Are you ready?
Yeah, we're taping. So.
We're taping. Okay. It's August 30th, 2009, and we're sitting with
Lester Cockram.
And we are in Warren's Cave, and we're about to do an oral history of Warren's Cave and Les's history in caving. Mm-hmm. Les, how did you get started in caving?
I actually lived about a mile from here, a mile west of here, and I have to go back and say I started off as a rock climber. I enjoyed climbing mountains and rocks and things like that, so I had experience in climbing, and I got with Eric Amesbury. Well, take that back. Okay, let's go back further than that. I do a lot of running, marathon training, and across the road in the San Francisco forest is a place where marathon runners train. And I saw this truck one day that had a bat as a tag on the front of the vehicle, and a member of the Speleological Society. And I kept wanting to meet this person, because I knew about this cave, but having access was a problem. So after 2 or 3 times of seeing this truck in the parking lot, I finally ran into Irv Sterling. And Irv, I think, has been caving in there since probably middle 80s. So I got with Irv, and he introduced me to Eric Amesbury, and another one of my climbing partners, Bill McClancy, were taken into this cave. I want to say probably somewhere between 1889 and 1990, and so he took us in, and as you experience today, it's quite a drop going in and things like that. So with the experience that Bill McClancy and I had, it wasn't too much of a problem dropping down with the ropes and things like that. I was not used to squeezes, so that was a new experience. The cashews two of you experienced today can teach you a lot about yourself. But let you know, it'll test you mentally and physically. And so Eric took us back, and we went back to the sand room. Now, on the way back, we went up into the upper passage called Fame and Glory, and we wanted to do an exercise. This was the first day, and we turned our lights out, and we wanted to see if we could make it back to not to the entrance because of the drops, but we went quite a few, maybe 300 or 400 yards in the total darkness. So we felt our way out, and we just wanted to do an exercise to see if we could do it. So I can remember that day clearly. And of course, after that one trip, I was hooked on it. And my caving partners, since then until now, has been Irv Sterling and Eric Amesbury. And we've made several trips to the back. I think Irv holds a record going to the back. I forget exactly how many times, but it's close to 20 times all the way to the back. And I think I might only have 10 or 12. And Eric probably has 10 or 12 also. And so got my interest here, and after that, Irv and I, we volunteered to do some volunteer work at Jewel Cave, which is a cave, second largest cave in the United States, located in South Dakota. And I got out there and I learned about the Cons. It's a man and wife team that used to be climbers too, and they went into the cave and gave up climbing, got into caving. And Jewel Cave in South Dakota was known as a small cave. It was about 6 miles of survey passage back in 1961, thereabouts. And Herb was a graduate electrical engineer from a school on the East Coast, so he had some electronics background, and he built this device called an Annie. He called it Annie, short for anemometer. And he was able to measure the volume of the cave, and it came to over 1 billion cubic feet, standard cubic feet of air. And with that calculation, he calculated there's probably 200 miles of cave to be found. And at that time, they only had 6 to 10 miles of survey passage. Well, between him and his wife Jan, over a period of about 6 years, they surveyed an additional 66 miles of cave. And by that time, they were getting up in age, in their 70s, and they devoted their life to it. I mean, they actually live in a cabin out there to this day without electricity. And they live very, very simple, even though they're both very educated. And they got a little older, and so some others took over. Now, I'm not really sure of the mileage, but I'm thinking Jewel Cave might be up to 140-some miles of surveyed passage. And again, remember, in the very beginning, cavers thought, well, this is going to be a small cave, and that's it. They just didn't have any idea. So Herb Kahn is the guy that came up with measuring airflow. So he published something in '61, a booklet, and I was very interested in it. And electrical engineering and gas measurement's my background. So I put together a little weather station and did a cave study back in 1994. So with the results of the study, I calculated there was a total of 93 million cubic feet of volume in this cave. So that equates to a lot of passage that we hadn't found yet, and that's what keeps me going, is the fact that knowing there's a lot of extra cave in there, we just can't find it. I actually had two setups going simultaneously. I had a setup at the second squeeze where you were today, and I had one at the entrance. So total volume was 93 million. From his second squeeze back, it was 66 million, so I had about 31 million up here in front. So I consulted with the Cons. It's not a lot of people that do what we do. We've got a Neville Mickey that's located in Australia. It's done some wind studies. And Bruce Zer, I believe it is. It's located in Tennessee now, but he did Lichagia Cave and calculated the volumes on those. And they've been a little more lucky than I have. They have caves that they had a lot of help, and they've actually found a lot of extra mileage. So,
Les, could you describe exactly how you measure the volume of the cave and the airflows within the cave?
It's very simple. There's 5,280 feet in a mile, and I have an anemometer. It's a little wind gauge that measures the wind speed, and if you know the opening, in this case I had 1 square foot and a 1.87 square feet at the other entrance, and it's a function of barometric pressure. If the pressure increases, it fills the cave up with air. If the pressure decreases, such as like when you have a hurricane or something like that, the air blows out of the cave. So what I did, I measured the amount of air that was going into the cave and factored in the amount of drop we had in barometric pressure. And knowing the volume of the air, I was able to calculate about what we have. So I did many, many tests, and it averaged about 93 million cubic feet. I sent my results off to Herb Kahn, the expert, and his numbers, I didn't tell him when I came up with my calculations, and we were in correspondence quite a bit, and he came up with the same calculations that I came up with. So that was encouraging to have somebody like Herb that went over my data and came up with the same numbers. So basically, it's just measuring the amount of air going into the cave as a function of how much pressure you have behind it, in barometric pressure. So if you're blowing up a balloon, you know how it expands. You let loose of the balloon and the air escapes the balloon. So that's kind of an analogy of what a cave does. This is called a breather, in that air blows in or air blows out depending on the barometric pressure. And then, of course, you hit equilibrium too when you don't have any air flowing.
What have been the major breakthroughs in exploring this cave?
It's going to be hard for me to answer that without getting out the textbooks. Al Krause, which he's published, and he has about a 20-page article that I would suggest, reading that. And Al, my mind slips me now, Rob Nobel, that's in Quincy. I think he's probably has made more breakthroughs in this cave than anyone that I'm aware of. So that's not a question I don't feel comfortable in answering. And basically, I can tell you what's happened, since I've been exploring. But I know there hadn't been any major passage found since Bob Nobel's last discovery, and that was back towards the register room and back in the very back.
Can you talk a little bit about digging out that one section that we were in today?
Okay, that's called the diggings, and that started with Lonnie, and I'm sorry I don't remember Lonnie's last name. I know he was a geology major, and I'm not even sure if he still lives in town, but he was looking at the geology of the cave, and he was looking at one side and looking at the other, and he realized that there used to be a passage many years ago between just the other side of the sand room and the branch where it goes, one side, the left side goes to the solution pipe, and then the diggings on the right-hand side. And he looked at that and he says, if we could clear this plug out with all the sand, we would have a shortcut that would bypass quite a bit of belly crawling. The second squeeze, as you two found out today, it's not an easy crawl.
No.
So if that plug could be cleared, it'd be just like a superhighway towards the sand room. That was a project I worked with quite a bit. Lonnie started it, and for reasons I'm not sure if he moved out of town or what, he let the project go. And then Irv Sterling, Eric Amesbury, and myself, what we would do, we'd come in on Tuesday nights, different nights of the week, and try to dig an extra 10 to 15 feet maybe per night. And we would have, it's all times people wanting to come into the cave just to take a peep, and we'd say, well, you come in, but you got to earn your ticket. And what we would do, we would have them help us dig and fill up 5-gallon buckets full of sand, and we had a little sled that we put the buckets on. We poured the sled out to points where we could empty the sand. So hoping one day we can start that project up again, because I'd love to dig that out and be able to bypass the squeeze, because when you're bringing food, equipment, and supplies in, that's a very, very tight area.
Can you talk a little bit about what we were doing today with locating that point?
Okay, today we brought in a beacon transmitter. It was actually on 8 kilohertz, the frequency, a very, very low frequency. It takes low frequencies because radio waves would just not penetrate normal radio frequencies. So it's almost 8 kc is almost a sound frequency. Set up a beacon at the entrance to the squeeze that I was talking about earlier, and Wendy and I'm not sure about Wendy's last name either. I just met her today for the first time. We had the receiver, and we were topside, and I had an idea from just looking at topo maps about where the topside location is to the second squeeze. And so today, with the equipment that we used, with the beacon being in the cave, and we had receiver topside, we were able to locate the top, and it worked out really, really good. We had a nice signal. It nulled, and I feel as though we got it within inches of, we know now topside. So that'll help in surveying, and all the famous cave explorers, the first thing they say you need to find new passage is a good survey. Roger Brucker, he's known for, that's his quote, so have a good survey. So with that point we had today, and if we get a few more points, today was just experimentation. We like to come back and get a lot more points involved, and that way we can plot a topside map to go along with the bottom, because we don't know how accurate the original survey is here.
How did people do surveying prior to locating these points?
About the only thing they had back then was a good compass, an inclinometer, and some really good note-taking, and of course a tape. I was in on some of these surveying at the very end with Bob Nabel, and that's exactly what we had, a compass, tape measure, and inclinometer. We got our angles and the directions, so we don't know how accurate that is. I mean, you'll take a measurement one direction, then you come back and do it in the other direction, for checksumming. But today, and I'm not familiar with all the technology, but they use lasers now. Mm-hmm. You can point and measure with a laser beam and reflectors. And back then, you didn't have the software that we have today, so you can get the data, put it into spreadsheets, and it'll actually draw a cave for you. So the only thing a person had to come in now is actually just draw the physical, like rocks and things like that, reference points. But far as the one-line drawings and things like that, or even three-dimensional drawings now, is all, you get the readings, put them into a computer, and it draws the cave for you.
Can you talk a little bit about how this cave was formed, and what are some of the unique features of the geology in Florida caves?
Really, I wouldn't be comfortable in answering that. I'm not a geologist, and I've read a lot about it, and then it's so easy to forget. So I know this cave, I think it's only about 2 million years old, where a lot of the caves, such as up in Kentucky, is probably 80 to 100 million, but I'd rather for that information, if you go into something published by Al Krause, or somebody that actually has a geology background. I do know from Art Palmer, which he has quite a few books out, that this cave, the reason we don't have decorations, a lot of it was formed from the bottom up, where a lot of caves, if you go into North Florida, you see the decorations and things where the water actually dripped from the ceiling, and you have the pretty decorations, but I'm thinking the ocean actually came up from bottom up to form a lot of this. But you find very few decorations. There's a few, so you don't have a lot of leaching that comes from the top. But in short, I wouldn't feel comfortable answering any of those questions.
How does external weather affect conditions in the cave? We saw that fault line that had opened up. Is there any other?
That's quite a fault. I'm not really sure what happened. I don't know if we had a lot of rain and it undercut under the large fault, or if we had a drought and the water table dropped, or what. But that's very, very interesting. It's so interesting that I'd like to do another wind study. As I said before, my last wind study was 94, and with this drop, I'd like to know if that might have opened up some new airflow. So I'm hoping sometime in the future I can do another wind study to determine if anything came of the drop. But we call that the monster drop. I mean, it was quite a drop. And that happened back. I want to think it's when we had all the rain several years ago. And the soil might have been undercut from the water coming down in the cave. And of course, that had to be a big undercut. But I'm not really sure what happened there, and I'm not sure if anybody's done a study to know exactly what happened there.
Can you talk a little bit about sinkholes and their relationship to these caves?
What I know about sinkholes is it's just a lot of times in Florida you have a lot of wet caves, and they'll be full of water, and I guess the pressure actually holds the ceiling up, and you can have droughts and the water table might drop, and then you have a collapse. I think that's probably one of the more common ways sinkholes are developed.
What are some of the dangers of caving?
I think the biggest danger is the drop. This is probably, to me, well, without doubt, this is the hardest cave to cave in of any cave I know. I mean, it's probably as tough a cave as anywhere in the United States, because most people...
Now you tell.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very, very tough cave. It's a lot of belly crawls, a lot of tight squeezes and things like that. I like to go to Mammoth and some of these other caves, and you ought to see all the clothes and things, people are allowed to wear, and things. And another thing that's tough about this cave is the average temperature is around 69 to 70 degrees, and that's very, very hot. And of course, you have 100% humidity. But getting back to the dangers, I think the dangers is at the very entrance to that. And I guess that's in some way, I guess it keeps a lot of people out. It might not be comfortable with a cave from ever coming in, but the drop is massive coming in here. It takes a lot of time for people to go down the rope and then go back up. You're dropping 50 or 60 feet, and then you have to crawl back up or climb back up. So to me, that's the biggest danger. I don't know if the only injuries that I know of is right here in the very beginning. I don't know of any back in the back. You can get stuck from time to time, but as one old caver told me one time, and it makes sense, if you get stuck, don't worry, you'll dehydrate enough to where you can get out. And I made the comment, I don't know if you heard me coming in, my pants fit tight coming in, but I lose so much from sweating and things like that. By the time you come out, your pants, you can't keep them up. So so if you get stuck, I think you'll get out from dehydration enough. But I've been stuck a few times. But, you always manage to get out. And no one's immune, I think, to panic attacks. I mean, everybody has those. I've had them. I can remember where I've had one or two back in the back. And the only thing you can do is close your eyes and let your heart rate go down and just relax and go out of it. And you lose a lot of efficiency, too. The more you cave, the more efficient you get. You know how to place your hands. Your brain has a memory to know where to place your hands and feet. And like today, it's been a while since I've been in, so I was slow today. But
have you had any problems with cave-ins here or in any other cave?
No. I've seen what can happen, like at Mammoth Cave, the rock that you was talking down here, it collapsed one time several years ago and came down. But there's a few accidents. NSS reports them each year. It's an annual event, and I hadn't read up on a lot, but I think falls is probably one of the bigger things that can happen.
How is the caving community organized? Someone mentioned grottos. How does that work?
Let's see if I can quote that. You have, I think, 3 grottos in the state of Florida. You have Teabag, which is Tampa Bay area. I'm not exactly sure what it stands for. And then you got one in, and I'm not sure if it's called Flint. And of course, you have the local grotto here, the FSS, Florida Speleological Society. I'm short on time, like everybody on this planet, and so my caving is here. This is the only cave that I'm interested in. I've had the same 2 partners now for 20 years, Eric Amesbury and Herb Sterling, and our interest is in this cave. So to answer your question, I'm not really sure, the grottos and my life's here, and it'll probably stick here until we find some passages. I've been in all the caves in Florida and a lot of the wet caves, but most time I just go in one time. But this one, I keep coming back.
What is it about this cave that fascinates you so much?
The secrets that it doesn't want to give up. Warren has a lot of secrets, and I've been chasing them now for going on close to 20 years. And I'm stubborn. Warren's stubborn, and Warren's been here, a couple million years, and I don't know how many years I've got left, but I'm going to have to speed up. But I want to know some more secrets about Warren's. It's without doubt, there's a lot more to be found, and that's what drives me.
Would you say this cave has a personality?
It has a personality that doesn't give up its secrets, that's for sure. Yeah, that's its biggest personality. It's stubborn. It doesn't give any, it's not easy. It's nothing easy to do in this cave. I mean, so many caves, you can walk, you can actually run through them. This one, you really have to work for everything you get. Man, I think the challenge is what I like in my 2 caving partners.
What is it that you enjoy most about caving?
Science.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of science involved in it's a lot of biology. I mean, you pick your science. I like the physics of it, the wind study, because it's a lot of engineering involved in doing the wind study, and so that's science. A lot of science in caves. They can tell you a lot. It's just like it. You can look at the rocks and the scallops, and you can tell which way the water flows by looking at the scallops. And if the small scallops, say like that, the water was flowing through in a hurry, and the larger the scallop is. And the scallop is where the rock has been dished out by currents. And if you look at a large scallop, the water was flowing very, very slow. I've seen scallops maybe an inch long, and I've seen them in different caves 3 feet. And the Warrens has a lot of scallops in the back, which is good. So it tells us we had a lot of water flow at one time.
Can you talk a little bit about the solution tube?
We have several solution tubes, and the most unique one is we go back in right around the infernal triangle, and you take a left, which is going back towards the east, and say you have a drip from a ceiling, and you have carbonic acid, and that's what etches the limestone. Well, say if you have a drip here and you have limestone here, and over a period of many thousands of years, it just drips and it dissolves the limestone away, and it makes a perfect little solution pipe. Now, the one back, well, I didn't take you back there, I took Alex, but it's about that big around. It looks like it goes, we can't see the bottom, it looks like it goes down 60 or 70 feet. So it took many thousands of years, to form that. But it's caves, they have a lot of time on hand.
What sort of animals and plants and fungi live down here?
Well, we have a snake. It stays at the front. Very few things go very far back in the cave. I did see a bat today, the furthest back ever, and that was back by the digging, Lonnie's dig. But that's not a lot of life forms. Well, I'll take it back. There's a lot of mice, and it was kind of interesting. Back when I was doing my studies, we didn't have anything but 35 millimeter film cameras. We didn't have digital, and so I was taking pictures back there, and I developed the film, and it was neat to have a mouse in my picture. He was right there next to me, next to my computer. But there's a lot of holes that go topside. I hadn't found them yet. That the mice come down, but they had to go back topside to get food because there's certainly no food sources down here.
Can tree roots reach down into the cave?
It's interesting, the tree roots that we saw today at Broward's People Hole. If you go to Google, type in tree roots, forget exactly how it goes, but it's something like 80% of all roots are within the first 3 feet of the surface.
Wow.
And so I did some research when I found these roots back at Broward's People Hole, and I was hoping that we had an opening, a sinkhole opening, and that's the reason the roots came down. So I did a lot of research and come to find out there was a professor at the university that actually studies, he studies tree roots. And I took some pictures and sent them to him, and he was most interested in those. And he said, it's not very common, but it can happen. And these roots are, today, if my measurements are right, from a place that we got the georeference point, it was 44 feet from the surface down to the top of the cave area at Broward's People Hall. So those roots are 40-some feet long. And they just dangle from the ceiling. And I was talking to this professor, I forget his name, he's well known. If you Google University of Florida tree roots, and you get him. That's how I found him. But anyway, his roots hanging down, and I said, well, it's probably the roots are just grasping moisture. It's probably not a lot of moisture between here and topside. And that's what happens. The roots is down there. You'll have a lot of surface area on the roots, and they're picking up, because the cave is 100% humidity, and it's picking up the moisture. But I think your question was, is it common? And no, it's not very common. Again, if you Google it, you'll find out that roots stay near the surface, but these are going down 40-some feet. So.
Can you talk a little bit about access to caves and private property rights versus the ambitions of cavers to explore as many caves as possible?
Well, you were talking about the grottos, and so the grottos do get permission from landowners, and NSS, National Speleological Society, they have means by which working with landowners. Of course, all caves have a gate, and usually you're a member of the grotto or a society or something to gain permission to get in the cave, and you've proven some skills or either you're going in with someone else. But yeah, somebody always owns the land, so that's definitely a problem. I mean, I'm known as a cave digger, and I would love to get with some property owners on this one and sink another shaft. If nothing else, to have supplies brought down, because it's so hard to get to the back. I told you I've been to the back, and it takes about 13 hours at best round trip to go back there.
Wow.
And by the time you're back there, you're so tired, you don't feel like doing any digging or looking. You're going back there, and it's time to turn around and come back. And by the time you get to the back, you're completely exhausted. I don't care what kind of shape you're in. And like in my case, I've ran many marathons, and I've done a lot of mountain climbing, but the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is go to the back of Warrens and back.
Wow.
I mean, a marathon is easy. The 26-mile run is very, very simple. And
Really?
Barbara, you got a little taste, didn't you? I mean,
Yeah,
what it's like today. So it's very, very physically demanding. So yes, I'd like to have an access point where we'd lock it and have a means of getting a head start on it, where we could find the other passage and find the passage, lock it up, or weld it up after that. Once we could survey it and know it's there. It's just the unknown. It's what gets explorers or cavers.
How much of the knowledge of caving is orally transmitted, and how much of it's written? I mean, how do you go about learning how you're doing what you're doing?
Far as wind studies, there's very, very little. Like I said, I pretty well know everybody that does wind studies on one hand. But as far as the geology and things like that, it's many, many reference books out there. Art Palmer, I've taken a class under him at Western Kentucky, and he's got 2 books out. He's got one book he just released probably a couple years ago. He covers just about everything. And Roger Brucker, he's got quite a few textbooks, and there's a lot of information out there. And of course, the web is great. Mm-hmm. Then you have Cave Diggers. It's a group on the internet. So it's a wealth of information out there. It's just not a lot of people that's studying wind caves right now and studying airflow and things like that.
Are there any tall tales told about this cave?
Probably so, but I don't know about them. Again, I'm really new to this cave. If you think about it, 1988 up until present, that's not a lot of time. Considering this cave's a couple million years old about it. So I'm sure there are some tales that I don't have anything to share with you. I wish I did, but that's where Bob Nabel will come in. Yeah, I think he'll be worth a wealth of knowledge to.
35 minutes.
Keep going. Do you want to keep going?
If you have questions,
let me think of some more questions. How has the internet changed caving? I mean, that's come into play in your time as a caver.
Well, I wish we had internet back when I was communicating with Herb Kahn. Of course, now again, Herb doesn't have electricity. He did have a telephone. But it's just instant communications. You can share documents and pictures. That's wonderful. Like when I was consulting with Herb, he had a manual typewriter, and I could show you some of the letters, that he wrote me. And then I did have a computer, so I had a word processor, but he had a manual typewriter. So our correspondence backwards and forwards was with mail, and so that took a while. Whereas today it's instantaneous. So I love internet. I love research. I love to be able to go on and Google. Google's my favorite word. So definitely computers and internet has helped in all phases of science.
What's the relationship between cavers and environmentalists and scientists all involved in caves? Is it a positive relationship, or are there moments where you guys are locking heads, and what would those, or locking horns, what would those issues be over?
There is some differences. I think the scientists and the cave diggers are probably on the same page. I'm not really an environmentalist. I mean, I like, my favorite tool is a hammer, and I'll have to admit that. And if you're going to find new passage, you're going to have to use a hammer. And you have a lot of purists, and I can understand, where they're coming from too. They want to leave things as is, but in order to find things, I've had to break open, some passages, and you're not going to find passage if you don't use a rock hammer. So most time when people find passages, it's a little small, what we call a mouse hole, and you'll feel air coming out of it. A lot of times, like we're here now having a conversation, all of a sudden the barometric pressure changes and people will feel a little air coming out of a little hole. Next thing you know, you beat it off the hammer, and all of a sudden on the other side of the hole, you got this big, huge opening. And that's where all passages is found. So I don't think the true environmentalists would want to do that, leave it like it is. But it's quite a few people that's on my side, the cave diggers group, and we enjoy using the hammer.
Yeah. Can you think of any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. What do you think about these tourist caves, where there's tourists that, I guess they have caves that are specifically geared for tourists, and they go in, they show them all the formations.
Yeah, I think that's great. You have quite a few show caves, and the caves that have the handrails and the staircases, we call those spelunkers. And the wildcat, like what we did today, we're pretty adamant about being called a caver. People explore in a wild cave like this. We like to be called cavers, but the spelunkers, that's great too. It's quite an education, and I think everyone needs to see some of the larger caves. I mean, if you've never been in a cave, I mean, it'll just blow you away to see the volume of some of them, such as Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, and Mammoth Cave, which is over 300 miles of surveyed passage now, the largest in the world. And so the show caves, yeah, all for it. Yeah, I think it's very educational.
Can you talk a little bit about the tag caves and the differences between Warrens and the tag caves?
I really can't tell you a lot about the tag caves because honestly I've never been in a tag cave. Okay. I'm familiar with the tag area, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. I know the serious cavers up there, and they have the nickname, did have the nickname as the dynamite guys because they take their dynamite serious and take it in and blow a hole out, and that's how they found a lot of the passages that they have up there. But I know it's a good, serious group, and they're blessed with some good caves up there. But as I mentioned earlier, I started off as a rock climber. I've climbed some of the rocks up there, but I've never been up there caving. With the job, you stay busy, and of course, the family now is all out of school and things like that, but you're in your 40s and 50s, you're raising kids and things like that, and you don't have a lot of time. And now that I'm 60 and about ready to retire, I'm looking forward to spending a lot of time here. But when I have time off, this is a place I want to be. So as far as tag and other caving events, I hadn't been to those.
Do you have a favorite part of Warrens?
I think the favorite part probably is what I call Les's Dig, and I felt some air as you go in beyond the cashew squeeze to the right, the left, goes to the solution pipe, and to the right branch, it's called left and right branch. On the right branch, I felt some air came out. I came out of there one time, and I've dug down quite deep, but it's a lot of work involved. I do have a pulley and ropes and things like that, so I guess for right now that's my favorite, and I'd like to get back on that someday because I know that's a particular lead. Naturally, I love the very back, but what you have to put into getting to the very back is it's really, really, really tough.
Is it pretty narrow back there, all the passages?
Well, you actually have places open up very, very large, but you have to go through a lot of tight passage to get there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, really, really tight in some areas. So, but once you get back in there, it's some very, very large cave. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
as
very
big
large
as
rooms.
This room, or
how far is they're not as high. Like if you go to the bottom in this area here and look up, you can look up 50 or 60 feet. I don't know of any areas like that back there, but the volume, just vast volume in size, is back there. So that's neat. And boulders, huge breakdown boulders. And what I mean by that is large boulders over the years have just dropped down to the ground. So It's very big back there. You know, you could some areas you could drive a Mack truck through, so
Wow.
it's nice in those areas. But the work you have to go through to get back there, and then the latest part now, it's very, very tight, very hard chert flint rock. So again, if it didn't take so long to get back there, I think we could find some more passage real quickly.
Can you talk about some of the more colorful names for sections of the caves? I know about the Cashew Squeeze and how that maybe they got their names.
Let's see. Well, you actually have one called Smoker's Den, and way back then in history, you actually had guys that, well, there was a time when we didn't think smoking was harmful, you know, but way back in the days. And so there was one place that one or two of the guys would like to smoke, so they called that Smoker's Den. I don't know how the passage went now. It's called Chicken Grotto. I have no idea how it got its name. Let's see some of the other passages. The Runaway is a nice passage, and it got its name because that's a spot. Once you get through the Cashew Squeeze and some of those places, you know, you could actually run through that section, so it's pretty nice. So that's a nice name. Dorothy's Delight was named after my ex-wife because she got stuck in there at one time and went through a little panic attack, and so we named that after her. And she got through that. The Register Room gets its name. Of course, we had a register back there for years, and so that was kind of a challenge for people to go back there to actually sign the register. And that was back there for many years, and we don't know what happened to the registry. It came up missing. So it's only been a double handful of people that actually has been back to the Register Room. My ex-wife was the first lady to go back there, and then Susan, I forget Susan's last name, she was out of Tampa and she moved to North Carolina. She went back there with us, and then Sarah, we took her back several months ago. So it's three ladies that's been back there, and then the rest, maybe 10 or 12 guys that's been to the very back. So it's quite a chore to get back there. It's a lot. I'd love to show people get back there, and I've taken one or two people back and they said, well, I'll never go back there again. And I think we hear a lot of that. You know, a lot of people come in warrants do not want to return.
Well, I'm pretty much out of questions. Do you
Yeah,
have
I
anything
think
else?
I think they're
That sounds like
waiting for us up there. So,
that was a great
That's
great
great.
interview. It's gonna be
Well,
nice.
well, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Well,
Les.
I'm glad you didn't ask me questions where I had to come up with a lot of names and things like that. But I can furnish you with a lot. But please do call Bob Nabel for the history. And it might even be worth a trip running up and meeting him in person, because he'll talk as long as you stay there with him.
He's the guy in Quincy.